There's a reason you've been feeling restless lately. Like, you don't fit inside your own life anymore. Like, you're watching yourself from a distance. Going through the motions, but not really present. That disconnection you've been trying to fix, trying to understand, trying to medicate with distractions. That's not anxiety. That's not depression. That's death. Your old self is dying. Not metaphorically. Not eventually. Right now. And this message found you because you're finally ready to stop resuscitating them, to stop trying to stretch a skin that no longer fits, to stop performing CPR on a chapter that already ended. You're ready to let them go. This kind of signal always arrives before your new self emerges. Not when you feel prepared, not when life feels organized, not when it's convenient, but right here, in the chaotic middle, in the space where everything feels like it's ending, and nothing new has fully begun yet. And if you can understand what's actually happening in this moment, if you can see the death for what it is, instead of fighting it, everything changes. Let me tell you what most people never admit to themselves. You're addicted to who you used to be. And I don't mean that symbolically. I mean, your nervous system is literally dependent on the version of you that has been steering your reactions for years. Not because that version was thriving, not because they were fulfilled, but because they were familiar. Your brain knows how they respond to pressure. Your body knows how they carry tension. Your thoughts know exactly which loops to run when things get difficult. And that familiarity, that predictability, it feels like safety, even when it limits you, even when it traps you, even when you know, deep down, that version of you is the exact reason you stayed stuck for too long. You keep returning to them because the known struggle feels less terrifying than the unknown expansion. That is the addiction. And until you see it clearly, you'll keep trying to change your life while staying the same person. And that cannot work. Because every single day, without realizing it, you haven't been living. You've been replaying, rehearsing the same internal dialogue, responding to the same triggers, making the same choices that lead to the same outcomes, walking the same invisible treadmill, and calling it movement. You weren't being present. You were being programmed. Not because you chose it today, but because you practiced it for years. And what you practiced long enough started to feel like identity. But identity is not permanence. Identity is repetition, and repetition can be broken. You can't become who you're meant to be while running the old emotional operating system. Those two versions cannot coexist. You can't upgrade the software while clinging to the outdated system. You can't pour new potential into old structures and expect it to hold. You can't step forward while refusing to shed backward. Something has to end so something new can begin. Not improve, not adjust, not evolve slowly, but drop away completely so the new you has a room to form. You've tried transformation before. You've felt the surge, the motivation, the emotional adrenaline of reinvention. And every time you said, "This time will be different," you believed it. But it wasn't different. Not because you lacked effort, but because you were trying to be reborn while refusing to let the old self dissolve. You were repainting the walls of the cage instead of walking out of it. Let me give you a clearer metaphor. There are creatures in nature that molt. They outgrow their shell, their exoskeleton, the protective layer that once kept them safe. And when it's time to grow, that shell does not stretch. It cracks. It splits. And they must crawl out unarmored, exposed, without protection, while the new shell forms around their expanding body. And here's the critical truth. If they don't fully shed the old shell, if fragments of it stay attached, the new one forms around the leftover pieces, warped and restrictive. Their growth becomes stunted, constrained by what they refuse to release. And you are molting too. That restlessness, that pressure, that feeling like you've outgrown your own life, that's the cracking, the internal tectonic shift, the moment between identities where you have no armor at all. And it feels terrifying, because vulnerability always feels like collapse when you don't understand it's actually creation in progress. But you can't crawl back into the old shell anymore. Not now, because it's already cracked. The only question left is whether you'll fully let it fall away or let fragments distort the version that's emerging. And here's the emotional paradox. The version that is dying isn't only the wounded parts of you. It isn't just the pain, the fear, the insecurity, the doubt. It is the identity you constructed around surviving those wounds, the armor you forged, the coping you mastered, the masks you perfected, the story you rehearsed so often that you began to call it me. It was the person who had to be strong because vulnerability once felt like a liability, like an open wound inviting danger. It was the person who had to be flawless because love once felt like something earned through performance, not presence. It was the person who learned to shrink their brilliance, to dim their voice, to make themselves palatable, digestible, non-threatening, because shining too brightly once made others uncomfortable, or worse, made you a target. Those versions of you were not mistakes. They were necessary adaptations. They were survival intelligence, not weakness. They were your nervous system's genius solution to environments that couldn't hold your softness, your imperfections, your wild light. They served a purpose, a sacred one. They protected you when you had no protection. They carried you through seasons when you lacked the strength to carry yourself. They buffered impacts that could have shattered you. They were your shock absorbers in earthquakes you never asked for. They were the temporary scaffolding that kept the building upright when the foundation was still forming. They were the emergency response team for the storms that arrived without forecast. And for that, they deserve gratitude, not resentment. But here's the truth that arrives once the storm clears, and the scaffolding is still standing. You were never meant to live inside the scaffolding. You were meant to remove it once the structure could stand on its own. Chapters end, not because they failed, but because they finished. Trying to live inside a chapter that has already ended? That doesn't make you loyal. That makes you stuck in a time loop, rereading pages that can no longer update. It doesn't honor your resilience. It traps you in the shape you took to endure, not the shape you were meant to become. Most people misunderstand this moment. They think if it hurts to let go, it means they're losing something essential. They think if it feels unfamiliar to act differently, it means they're betraying who they are. They think if the old identity protests, it means the new one is wrong. But transformation always feels like betrayal to the old self, because the old self was built to survive a world that no longer exists. You're not stuck. You're shedding, molting, outgrowing a shell that once kept you safe but can no longer let you expand. The shell is cracking because it cannot contain the size of you anymore. And the cracking feels chaotic. It feels like internal static. It feels like the moment between inhale and exhale where your lungs ache for air but haven't received it yet. It feels like standing at the edge of a cliff where the old ground has disappeared but the new one hasn't fully materialized. It feels like being suspended in identity-free space, and that is exactly why it is the birthplace. Not because you feel ready, but because you feel unable to stay the same anymore. The old self doesn't need fixing at this point. They don't need self-help manuals or motivational pep talks or revision. They need recognition. They need to be seen clearly, named honestly, honored sincerely, and then released ceremonially. Not like trash, but like a soldier being retired with medals. The new self doesn't need forcing. They don't need fabrication. They don't need construction from scratch. They are already there, waiting beneath the noise, waiting beneath the conditioning, waiting beneath the rehearsed reactions. They need uncovering, not invention. And the space between these two selves, the vulnerable moment where you have no shell at all, that is not collapse. That is labor. The moment where identity is fluid so it can reform. The moment where the universe applies pressure because you're finally strong enough for pressure to shape you, not destroy you. So let me ask you something now. Honestly, without poetic softness, without spiritual sugarcoating, without gentle padding, how much longer will you keep trying to fit into a life you've outgrown? How much longer will you attempt to upgrade a version of yourself that was only meant to get you here, not carry you forward? How many more years will you spend renovating rooms in a house you were meant to walk out of? Because this moment, the one you've been interpreting as internal failure, is actually the moment of readiness, the emotional signal, the alarm clock your soul set months or years ago. You feel the signal already, the restlessness, the friction, the disconnection, the sudden intolerance for emotional debt. for energy drains, for self-betrayal disguised as loyalty. That is not failure. That is the system rebooting. Your frequency has shifted, and the old world can hear the distortion. Your standards have upgraded, and the old container can feel the cracks. Your soul has outpaced your circumstances, and now your circumstances are starting to feel the gap. And here's the cosmic rule most people learn only after they finally obey it. The universe does not reward stagnation. It rewards motion, not perfection, not readiness that looks neat on paper, not confidence that feels unshakable, but movement aligned with inner truth, action anchored in recognition, choices made from clarity, not consensus, direction chosen from intuition, not fear of judgment. And the moment you stop clinging to the cracked shell, the moment you step forward without needing permission from your past identity, the moment you speak the vow instead of whispering it silently to yourself, that is the moment the universe begins arranging externally what has already aligned internally. Because alignment responds back, not before you move, but because you moved. So, if this message found you today, if something inside you stirred, clicked, recognized itself in the words like deja vu hitting bone, if your system felt the truth before your brain tried to debate it, then do this one thing before the moment evaporates back into silence. Go to the comments and type, "This is a new me." No explanation, no autobiography, no emotional footnotes, no narrative negotiation, no elaboration, just declaration. Because sometimes transformation needs to be spoken to be sealed, witnessed to be embodied, declared to be irreversible. Sometimes a vow is not made to inform others, but to bind your nervous system to a new direction. This message was not sent to comfort you. It was sent to activate you, to interrupt the loop, to break the recording, to end the debate between who you were and who you are becoming. The same intelligence that orchestrated this moment will orchestrate the next, but orchestration requires participation. Currents require cooperation. Guidance requires motion. So stop clinging to the cracked shell. Open your hand. Step forward. Let yourself emerge. Because your breakthrough, it was never in the distance. It was always in the transition. In the moment you finally stop trying to be who you were and start acting from who you are becoming. It's not coming anymore. It already arrived, disguised as the restlessness you tried to escape. And now, you finally see it. Now, you finally walk toward it. Now, you finally wake up. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely.